My name is Sophia. At 31, I was still living in an old two-story house with my parents on the outskirts of Cedar Falls, Iowa. To outsiders, it looked like I was dependent. To my parents, it was an unpaid obligation. Ironically, I was the only one in the house with a stable job. For 6 years, I worked as an accountant at a small agricultural supply company. The pay wasn't high, but it was enough to cover the electricity, water, internet, and sometimes even my parents' medical bills. The kind they never mentioned, but always assumed I'd handle. I never thought it was a problem. I thought it was family. Something you give without counting. Everything changed on what should have been just another Tuesday. My 31st birthday. The sky was overcast, the wind carried the smell of damp soil, and the first chill of the Midwest winter. I got off work close to 7 p.m., carrying a small paper bag with a vanilla cake I grabbed from the discount bakery down the street. "Happy Birthday, Sophia" was scribbled in uneven red icing. I smirked. Not because I was sad, but because I no longer expected anything more. Driving home, I didn't hope for a party, or flowers, or a hug. Just a happy birthday would have been enough. But that hadn't happened in years, and this time was no different. I parked the car, turned off the engine, and sat for a few more minutes. The house was silent, a dull yellow light spilling from the living room window. I inhaled deeply, counting in my head. 3 steps to the door, 5 to the kitchen, 7 to the stairs. When I walked in, the house was cold, as if the heater hadn't been turned on. No TV, no voices, just a thick silence clinging to the walls like fog. My mother stood at the sink, back turned, washing dishes. My father sat at the table, eyes glued to his phone, not even glancing up. I nodded, a reflex more than a greeting. No one responded. I placed the cake on the counter, took off my coat, and poured myself a glass of water. I tried to push away the dull ache rising in my chest. "It's fine," I told myself. "No celebration needed. As long as they still needed me here." But that thought turned out to be the last illusion I was still clinging to. I noticed a stack of papers in the center of the dining table. The electric bill, marked "past due" in bold red across the top. I didn't blame them. I never had. Tonight, I planned to quietly pay it, like I always did. But something in the air felt off. A kind of cold that didn't come from the weather, but from the way my mother avoided my eyes, the unusual detachment in my father's expression, the way the house, already old, suddenly felt unfamiliar. I took the cake upstairs without eating. No one asked about it. No one asked where I'd been, what I'd done, or if I was tired. Another quiet birthday. Another silent note in a song I had memorized. As I set the box down, I realized it wasn't that they forgot my birthday. It was that, to them, it simply wasn't worth remembering anymore. I sat there for a long while, listening to the wind press against the windows, and in that wind, for the first time, I admitted something to myself. Maybe I was never really part of this family. Just the last name on the electric bill no one wanted to pay. My mind started rewinding through memories I had pushed away for years. When I was 24, my father, Marcus, cracked 2 molars in an accident at the food plant. No dental insurance, no savings. My mother sighed. "He'll just have to deal with the pain for a few weeks." Where would we get money for that? I didn't reply. The next morning, I quietly transferred nearly $1,200 from my savings, the fund I'd set aside for a data analytics course, and slipped it into my mother's wallet with a note. "Take him to the dentist. No need to pay me back." She took it, folded the note, said nothing. 3 months later, my dad was chewing popcorn on the sofa and muttered, "Good thing the dentures are sturdy. If Sophia picked them, they'd probably be broken already." My mom laughed. I said nothing. At 27, my mom, Helen, skidded on the freeway during a snowstorm. Her tires were bald. She called me in a panic while I was in a meeting. I left work midday, drove nearly an hour through snow, and picked her up. That evening, I ordered 4 new tires, nearly $700, and had them delivered. She glanced at the receipt and said, "You're good with money. I'm sure you'll figure it out." No thanks, no acknowledgement, just the assumption I'd handle it all. Last spring, the roof started leaking. Rain fell straight onto my bed. I climbed onto the roof in drizzle and replaced the shingles myself. My father sat downstairs with a beer and yelled, "Don't mess up the roof. Contractors these days are crooks." My fingers bled from the sharp edges of the panels, but I didn't complain. I used to believe that if I just kept giving, kept showing up, eventually, I'd be loved. I once canceled a trip to Colorado to stay home and care for my mom when she had the flu. I cooked soup, ran errands, did laundry. When she recovered, she only said, "Oh, it takes care of me like a daughter does." The next day, they reminded me again, "Next time, remember to take the trash out on time." Every month, I paid the electric, water, and internet bills, like clockwork, nearly $300 total. Whenever I suggested splitting the costs, my mom would gently shake her head. "You don't want your parents to go without, do you?" Once, they forgot to pay the gas bill for 2 straight months. If I hadn't stepped in, we would have lost heat in the middle of winter. When my dad found out I'd paid it, all he said was, "Good thing she did it fast. Should have done it earlier, though." I used to think it was my duty. I believed blood ties couldn't be severed. That if I just tried hard enough, they'd see my worth. How much have I spent on this house over the last 10 years? How many dreams put on hold? How many times did I choose silence over speaking up? No one forced me to. I chose it. For this family, hoping, somehow, that love would come in return. But the price I paid was my own self-respect and youth. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, the birthday cake still untouched on the table by the window. Outside, condensation dulled the glass with a faint blur. Everything felt suffocatingly quiet, like even the house knew what was coming and didn't want to witness it. I changed out of my work clothes into a charcoal gray sweater, the only Christmas gift I received last year, not from my parents, but from a coworker. I washed my face, combed my hair, then walked downstairs like I was stepping into a battlefield where the outcome had already been decided. The dining table was still there. The stew had gone cold, the mashed potatoes had clumped, and the yellow kitchen light cast harsh shadows on the creases in my mother's forehead. Helen sat still, her hands folded. My father, Marcus, was on his 4th beer of the night, seated in a worn wooden chair, barely acknowledging me. I sat down and quietly picked up a green bean, chewing without tasting a thing. No one said a word. No happy birthday. No questions. No real glance. It wasn't until I got up to put the cake in the fridge that Marcus finally spoke. Not loud, but cold. "Do you even know what time it is?" I turned, still holding the box. 9:10. I came home after work. At your age, still needing a place to crash, don't you think that's a little pathetic? He looked at me, not like a father, but like a landlord tired of a tenant behind on rent. My mom stayed silent. The way she held her knife over the meat reminded me of how she used to teach me to cut birthday cake as a kid. I placed the cake down on the counter like sealing a chapter. I don't think I'm crashing here when I'm the one paying for the power, the internet, and even your credit card debt last year. Marcus leaned on the table, voice tightening. "Paying a few bills doesn't mean you get to stay forever. This isn't a motel." I inhaled deeply, no longer shocked, just painfully clear. "What exactly are you saying?" He folded his arms and leaned back in his chair like he had been waiting for that question. "We've discussed it. Your mother and I. It's time you moved out. Preferably by the end of the week." I looked at my mother. For the first time that evening, her eyes met mine. Not cruel, but empty. She gave a faint nod, barely perceptible. I smiled. Not because it was funny. but because suddenly, everything made such twisted sense. It almost felt relieving. So, my birthday was a deadline. No one answered. Only the ticking wall clock broke the silence, each second landing like a final verdict. I walked upstairs. Every step echoed louder than the words that had been spoken. Each creak in the wooden floor counted down to the moment I'd no longer belong here. Back in my room, the soft glow of my desk lamp fell over the birthday cake still sitting quietly. The icing had softened and the red letters blurred, as if even they were ready to leave. I stared at it, not craving it, not admiring it, just feeling hollow. Just like me. I was about to open my laptop to finish the company's monthly budget sheet, a distraction from feeling anything, when there was a sudden knock. 3 firm taps. Before I could even respond, my father opened the door. He never knocked. The knock was only a signal, a reminder that he was still in control. "Come downstairs for a minute," he said quickly, not meeting my eyes. I stood, cautious. Why now? Downstairs, my mother was already seated at the table. No party, no balloons. Just a stack of envelopes and an empty duffel bag placed on the chair beside her. I looked at them, then at the bag. "What is this?" My father leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his voice dry. "We think it's time you take care of yourself." I turned away, but before leaving the living room, I stopped. "Thank you for raising me. But you should know, I was the one holding this place together." I went back to my room and gently closed the door. No shouting, no tears. In my hand was a photo of that crooked little birthday cake, the only thing that even acknowledged my birthday that day. I pinned it to the wall above my desk, not to remember the pain, but to remind myself, sometimes, the day you get pushed out of the nest is also the day you learn how to fly. I used to think leaving meant physically moving out, but for me it began with a few mouse clicks. The night after that birthday, after the house had gone dark, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into each service account still under my name. I started with the electric bill. I was still listed as the primary payer. For 3 years, I had auto pay set to pull from my card on the 3rd of every month. Cancel. A confirmation popped up. Auto payment disabled. Then came water. Then gas. Then cable. Then internet. Each action felt like untying a thread I had wrapped around myself. Thinking I was protecting my family. I thought I'd misheard him. "You mean, move out?" My mom didn't answer. She just stared into her teacup like it might offer her a way out. "You're 31, Sophia. You can't just cling to your parents forever," he continued, voice steady like reading a script he had rehearsed. I stood still for a moment. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't panicked. Just a chilling kind of calm. "I'm not clinging. I've paid the electricity, the water, even Mom's car insurance last year," I replied, my voice so composed it surprised even me. "No one made you." My dad shrugged. "You chose to. And now it's time to choose to leave." I turned to my mom again. "What do you think?" She closed her eyes, and I understood. They had discussed this beforehand. Her silent nod was all the confirmation I needed. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. I didn't need to ask why, because I already knew. Years ago, I almost moved out, but stopped when Mom got sick. I told myself, family is something you never walk away from. But now, they were the ones walking away from me. I packed a few clothes, my laptop, personal documents, a jar of lotion Mom once said had a nice scent, and the cold birthday cake. As I pulled the suitcase downstairs, my father was watching TV. He didn't even look up. My mother stood by the sink, drying the last glass. When I passed by, she turned away, didn't say a word. I placed the suitcase by the door. "I'll be gone in the next few days. I'm not leaving tonight." No one objected. Then came the car insurance. I had bundled all 3 cars into one policy. Mine, Mom's old Camry, and Dad's chipped pickup. They said it saved money. And I, still believing that saving for them was a form of love, agreed. I removed their 2 vehicles from the plan. The system asked for a reason. I selected ending support for non-household family members. I sat there, frozen. The ticking of the wall clock felt like it was counting beats over the ruins of an old trust. The final step was the bank. My mom and I had once opened a shared sub-account, called it Emergency Family Fund. It started with $500, but I was the one who kept contributing. By the end of last year, it had grown to $3,200, nearly all of my personal savings for unexpected situations. Mom said, "Having this fund helps your dad feel more at ease. After all, you're the one keeping things steady for the whole family." I used to feel proud. Now, it just felt ironic. I transferred the entire amount into my personal account and froze the joint one, a temporary freeze, fully within my legal rights. A system message popped up. Account has been frozen. No withdrawals or transactions can be made unless both parties consent. I leaned back in my chair. The room was so silent I could hear my own heartbeat. Not fast, not trembling, just a strangely calm rhythm. The kind that comes after severing the final thread. This wasn't revenge. It was release. The next day, I drove to the city library to print records of the past 3 years of financial transactions. I printed every utility bill under my name, every insurance payment, every email confirming prescription orders for my dad, new tires for my mom, plumbing repairs from last winter. I organized everything in a blue folder labeled "What I Carried for a Family That Never Claimed Me." I didn't plan to use it right away, but I knew that someday I'd need to prove I wasn't ungrateful, and I wasn't weak. That evening, Mom called. 3 times in a row. I didn't answer. The first text came at 9:07 p.m. "Sweetie, I can't log into the bank. Is something wrong?" I set my phone down without replying. Next, a text from Dad at 9:24. "Wi-Fi's out. Call the provider." I smiled quietly. At 10:16, one final message from Mom. "Sophia, what did you do?" I closed my laptop, slipped the external drive into my bag, and stood up to take one last look around the room. Next to my half-packed suitcase sat the birthday cake from earlier, now hardened like a crust over everything I had once swallowed whole. I knew they wouldn't understand. At least, not right away. They'd think I was overreacting. They'd call me selfish. But maybe for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain. Because I no longer needed to be understood. I just needed to be free. I woke up the next morning to sunlight slipping through the curtains, softer and calmer than any day before. For the first time in months, I didn't rush to check work emails, didn't glance at upcoming bills, didn't check last month's electric usage. The first thing I did was make myself a cup of coffee. Not the cheap blend I used to brew for everyone, but the light roast I'd bought 3 months ago. For later, today was the moment they never saw coming. My phone buzzed once, then again, and again. Mom, then Dad, then Mom, one more time. An unfamiliar number followed, probably a neighbor they roped in to check on me. I set the phone on the kitchen shelf and let it hum like background static to the storm they had no idea was already here. Each vibration, each incoming call, chipped away at the silence they once used like a leash. Then came the first text. "Ani, the internet isn't working. The TV's down too. Did you cancel something on accident?" I didn't reply. A few minutes later, "I can't get into the bank account. I need to transfer money for your dad's medication. Did you change the password?" Then from Dad, "Your mom's phone can't make calls. Enough with the games, Sophia." And finally, the one that almost made me laugh. "If you're upset, can we just talk? We're family. No one wants this to go too far. I took a sip of coffee. The screen lit up again, but the guilt didn't. Only clarity. When the 12th call came, I picked up. Not to explain, not to justify, but to let them hear what losing control sounds like. Hello? My mother's voice cracked through the line. Sophia, what did you do? The bank account's frozen. The internet's down. The credit card got declined at the store. I don't understand. I'm panicking here. I didn't flinch. You're not wrong. I did it. And I had every reason to. Her voice tightened. Is this what family does to each other? I exhaled slowly, then said it. Calm, steady, final. Family doesn't throw their daughter out on her birthday. Silence. Then, her voice wavered. I can't believe you'd do this to us. Your dad has a fever. There's no electricity. He can't take the morning cold. I said nothing. Then she exhaled. Like switching roles from victim to accuser. Did you forget who raised you? Everything we did was for your own good. I smiled. Silently, so she wouldn't hear it. If throwing me out was for my own good, then maybe now it's time you both learn how to take care of yourselves. I'm not free in-home care. And I hung up. What followed was a barrage of texts from my father. You think this childish stunt will make us regret anything? You'll see, no one else will ever tolerate your attitude. Remember, Sophia, you chose this. Don't come crawling back when it's too late. Each message hit like a bullet aimed at the armor I had carefully built, but this time they didn't hurt. They felt light, like the sting after a vaccine. The needle's gone, and so is the poison. By noon, I left the house and drove to the laundromat to pick up some clothes. While waiting, I sat in my car and opened an old photo album. There it was. My 9th birthday. A slightly burnt homemade cake, my parents smiling wide. I used to think that was happiness. But now I knew photos capture moments, not the truth. When I got back, I saw a missed call from Aunt Carol in Minnesota. The accompanying text read, Lucia, call your mom. She's been crying all morning. Everyone's worried. I didn't call back. I didn't explain. Because I knew. The only thing they missed wasn't me. It was the person who made sure everything kept running. I thought it would stop after the initial chaos. After the Wi-Fi was cut, bills bounced, and the bank account was frozen. I assumed silence would be the end. That was wrong. 3 days later, on a quiet Saturday morning, I was having coffee with Nora, my best friend and new landlord, when my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from a former coworker, from an old high school friend, even from my middle school teacher, someone I thought had long forgotten my name, all with the same disturbing tone. Sophia, have you seen the post? Your dad? He posted something in the town's Facebook group. Are you okay? I opened Facebook and went to the group, Cedar Falls Community Big and Small Matters. The ting. The top post hit me like a slap. Posted by Marcus Kessler, my father's account. The first line, in all caps, no punctuation, no introduction. When your child becomes your betrayer. I read each sentence slowly. Every word a scissor cutting into the dignity I had preserved in silence for years. We gave her everything we had. Years of sacrifice. Not a single complaint. And now, in our twilight years, we've been abandoned. With no power, no water, denied access to medicine. All we ever wanted was gratitude. But she chose to leave, and punished the whole house just for being reminded of responsibility. The image attached showed my mom sitting under a blanket in a dark living room, head bowed in theatrical sorrow. I didn't know who took it, but it was clearly staged for the perfect victim narrative. Dozens of comments followed. Kids these days are terrifying. No parent deserves this. I'll be praying for you both. I set my phone down. My heart beat calmly, strangely so. Nora looked at me and asked softly, What are you going to do? I didn't answer right away. I didn't need emotion. I needed a plan. That night, I pulled out the blue folder I had compiled the day I cut financial ties. I reorganized it, numbered every document: electric, water, gas, internet, insurance. I attached screenshots of my bank transfers, payment history from my banking app, and emails titled, "Payment Confirmation for Account, Marcus Kessler." I found old texts too. Mom asking me to front money for roof repairs after the autumn storm, Dad asking for help paying the car insurance after missing the deadline. All of it saved. I never deleted a thing. I printed a copy of the defamatory Facebook post, highlighted every false claim in red ink. At the end of the folder, I handwrote a single line. When truth is twisted into a weapon, silence is no longer noble, it's complicity. I didn't post anything. Not yet. I let his post spread. The deeper he dug, the clearer his real nature would become. 3 days later, at the market, a middle-aged woman whispered to her friend when she saw me, "That's the girl who left her sick parents in the cold." They didn't know I heard. But I did, every word. That night, Nora asked, "Why haven't you said anything?" I looked at her, voice steady. "Because I want them to show just how far they'll go. And when I speak, the truth needs to be so loud. It doesn't require defense." The real question wasn't if I'd speak. It was when. And when I did, it wouldn't just be a story. It would be an autopsy of a toxic system. A family that mistook love for control and never saw my sacrifices as enough. At exactly 4:00 a.m., while the town still slept beneath a veil of fog and flickering streetlights, I began to write. Not with emotion, but with receipts, bills, emails, and memories I'd tried to forget. I started the post with a very short sentence. "I'm not the ungrateful daughter they say I am." Then I went on, item by item, period by period, each story laid out like a financial audit. February 2022. I paid $384.20 for the electric bill during the coldest month of winter after my parents forgot to pay for the third time. July 2021. I spent $679 on new tires for my mom after she got stranded on the highway. I also covered the towing fee that day, $113. When the roof leaked in 2020, I bought materials, climbed up, and repaired it myself over 2 rainy days, while my dad watched baseball under the dry patch I just fixed. And for the past 3 years, every bill, internet, cable, car insurance, was under my name. They never asked if I could afford it, only if I had paid it yet. I wasn't asking for pity, I was simply stating facts. The kind I'd been the only one holding on to for too long. I attached photos of the bills, screenshots of payment confirmation emails from the bank, even a photo of me patching the roof in the rain, snapped by our neighbor, Mr. Walter, while walking his dog last year. I ended the post with a short paragraph, like a final tear through the mask my parents had carefully crafted. I'm not angry they kicked me out. I'm hurt they forgot I was the one who kept that house standing for nearly a decade. If they choose lies for sympathy, then I choose truth for freedom. The post went live at exactly 4:37 a.m. in the same community Facebook group where my father tried to paint me as the villain. I didn't share it. I didn't DM anyone. I let it sit. A testimony without a lawyer. By noon, the post had over 120 shares. The first comment made my throat tighten. "Mr. Walter, I took the photo of her on the roof last year. I remember her working through the whole afternoon in the rain. Her parents sat inside without checking once. When I asked if she needed help, Sophia just smiled and said, 'I'm okay.' Next came Hilda, my high school biology teacher. I used to think Sophia came from a model family. Now I understand why she was always quiet about home. But then, the grocery store owner. She once delayed her own bill to help her parents pay for plumbing repairs. I saw it happen. Gradually, the narrative shifted. The accusations in my father's post were drowned out by a wave of truth and fragments of memory that others had witnessed too. Every time someone spoke up, I felt lighter, not because I was being defended, but because I wasn't the only one who remembered what actually happened. That afternoon, my father's original post disappeared from the group, no explanation. Nora handed me a grilled chicken sandwich, pressed it into my hands, and said, "See? Even the truth needs allies." I smiled. For the first time since I was kicked out. Yeah, but this time, my allies are the ones who stop staying silent. That night, brushing my teeth, I stared at myself in the mirror longer than usual. Not checking my skin or hair or lines near my eyes, but looking into the eyes that used to drop in shame, be now finally able to meet their own gaze. I thought about the years I gave without asking for anything back, the promises that were never kept. The quiet yes I said too many times, just to avoid letting someone down. None of that was on my shoulders anymore. I wasn't carrying them anymore. Not the bills disguised as love. Not the silent sacrifices. Not the ever-moving goalposts of expectations. The only thing I carry now is the truth. And truth, once sharp and cold, turned out to be lighter than any weight I'd ever taken on. I received the summons on a Monday afternoon, just as I stepped out of the community center where I'd signed up for an advanced accounting course. A uniformed courier in a gray jacket handed me a thick envelope stamped with Black Hawk County Court and said, "Is Sophia Kessler? You've been served. Civil suit. Contact in." I wasn't surprised. Truthfully, I'd been expecting this. I just didn't think it would come so soon. I opened the envelope right there. Bold letters at the top of the page jumped out at me. Allegation, elder abuse, family abandonment, and dereliction of family duty. Filed by Marcus Kessler and Helen Kessler. I let out a short laugh, not because it was funny, but because I had guessed right. This wasn't about justice. It was manipulation. This time dressed in legal language. That night, I pulled out all the documentation I had prepared. Original bills, bank statements, email threads with my mom, photos of the house with the patched-up roof I fixed myself, a spreadsheet detailing every dollar I had covered over 6 years. I sent everything to a nonprofit legal office in Des Moines. The intake staffer, a woman named Jenny, skimmed the folder, then looked up, wide-eyed. "How long have you been dealing with this?" "I'd say about 12 years, I said, calmly. "Like commenting on the weather?" She nodded, voice firm. "They can file this suit, but with what you have, you can countersue. Not just to dismiss the charges, but for financial abuse and long-term psychological coercion." 3 weeks later, I stood at the Cedar Falls police station to file the official countersuit. Jenny came with me. We arrived 15 minutes early. Outside the waiting room, I saw my parents seated on the wooden bench. My mom in her worn cardigan, fidgeting with a tissue. My father, arms crossed, legs casually stacked, eyes flicking across his phone screen without really reading anything. I walked in. He didn't avoid eye contact. Vera looked up, eyes red. I couldn't tell if it was from crying or fury. Marcus looked at me like I was the villain in the movie he believed he was writing. The officer handling the case was Lieutenant Scott Raymond. In his 50s, tall and lean, with a calm face, he sat behind his desk, flipping through the folders from both sides. His eyes lingered longer on mine. "Mr. Sophia, this is your file." "Yes. It includes invoices, payment confirmations, and related financial records." He flipped one page, then another. Then came the photo of the roof, followed by my mother's email. "Sophia, your father hasn't paid the gas bill this month. Transfer the money ASAP." Scott looked up at Marcus. "Mr. Marcus, Mrs. Helen, I need to remind you, filing a civil complaint with false or misleading information, especially with intent to damage reputation or apply financial pressure, may constitute civil defamation and be grounds for a countersuit." Marcus raised an eyebrow slightly. I just wanted my daughter to understand the consequences of cutting ties with her parents. Scott maintained his steady tone. You're free to express that verbally, but submitting false documentation into the legal system is no longer just a family misunderstanding. Helen lowered her head. Marcus gripped the handle of his briefcase. But for the first time, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. Scott turned to me. Would you like to proceed with the countersuit? I nodded. I would, because this isn't just personal anymore. It's a message to anyone who believes parents can control their children indefinitely under the excuse of giving birth. Scott signed the report and slid it across the desk. I respect your decision. I stood up without looking back. As I walked out of the police station, the early autumn sun hit my hair, warm in the gentlest way. Nora was waiting in the car, window down, wearing a smile that didn't need any questions. I got into the passenger seat, buckled up, and exhaled deeply. Nothing left to hide. No more roles I had to shrink myself into. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just standing for the truth. I was strong enough to keep walking without needing anyone's permission. I signed the lease for a small apartment on the west side of town in early November. It was on the 3rd floor, no elevator, chipped paint on the walls, windows facing a parking lot and an old laundromat across the street. But it was mine. Not a makeshift bedroom in my parents' house, not a corner of a room pushed against the window to avoid hearing arguments. This apartment was small, old, and lacking in amenities, but every square inch belonged to me. And that made me feel freer than any place ever had. On move-in day, all I had were 2 suitcases of clothes, an old laptop, and a small hand-drawn painting from my college dorm. Nora drove me there. She brought a warm thermos of coffee and a bag of homemade muffins. Here's to starting from here, she said, smiling as she handed me the key with a little maple leaf keychain. Yeah, I nodded. From here? And this time, it's for me. It took me almost a week to fix up the apartment. Every day after my shift at the local coffee shop, I stopped by thrift stores around the city, bought a wobbly wooden dining table I stabilized with old books, a faded fabric armchair someone once loved, and a vintage lamp with a tilted shade that gave off a gentle glow. I hung curtains, cleaned the floors, and posted little sticky notes around the kitchen. Today doesn't have to be perfect. Just okay is enough. Over the weekend, I repainted the living room walls a soft blue. The smell gave me a slight headache, but watching the color settle under my brush felt like repainting my past. And this time, I chose the palette. On Friday night, I updated my resume. I removed my old home address. For the first time in 31 years, I didn't have to list my parents' house on any paperwork. Under skills, I added household budget management, not as a self-deprecating joke, as truth. I'd managed finances for 3 people on a modest income for almost a decade. And now, I intended to turn that skill into a profession. I applied for 2 internal accountant positions at nonprofit organizations in town. Both required stress management, internal communication, and independence, qualities I had in abundance but had never dared to name. Every morning, I brewed coffee for myself. Not the cheap instant kind I used to make for the whole house, but a cup exactly how I liked it. Guatemalan beans, coarsely ground, with a pinch of cinnamon. I drank it on the balcony, watching traffic pass by below. Everything outside was still loud, but inside, me, something had finally grown quiet. I've started journaling again. Not to complain, but to track my progress. I wrote clearly. Day 12. Sophia said no to her mom's 8th voicemail. Day 16. Sophia fixed a leaking faucet with a $3 screwdriver. Day 20. Sophia made spicy Thai noodles that weren't too salty this time. They might seem small, but to me, they're signs of a woman finally living her own life, not just existing to keep someone else's together. One night, while cleaning out the kitchen cabinet, I found an old birthday candle tin. Not from this year. That cake had long been thrown out. This was the tin I'd meant to use to quietly celebrate my birthday alone. I took out one candle, placed it in the center of the table. No one sang, no one clapped, but I lit it. The tiny flame flickered, casting its glow on the blue wall I'd painted myself. I didn't make a wish. I only whispered one thing. Thank you for not giving up. December arrived with a soft layer of first snow, like a quiet blessing. I curled up in my old armchair, wrapped in the quilt Nora gave me as a housewarming gift, holding a half-read book and a mug of steaming cinnamon tea. There was no sound except the wheezing heater and the gentle patter of snow against the window, but in that silence, I felt something I once thought unreachable. Peace. No angry messages, no midnight calls demanding explanations, no stepping into a house that felt like an emotional minefield. Just me, a small room, and fleeting moments of freedom I was learning to stretch into forever. One Monday morning, I received an envelope with no return address. No postage, no markings. Inside was a handmade card, placed neatly in my mailbox, with a handwritten note in blue ink. You were never the problem. Some people are just afraid of those they can't control. No signature. But I knew it came from someone who had truly seen me, even if from the quiet. I pinned the card to the wall next to my desk. Every time I glance at it, I remember. Some people were silently watching, and chose not to stay silent forever. That birthday candle. The one I lit, not to wish, but to remind myself I still existed, now rests on my bookshelf, next to the hand-drawn painting from college. I didn't keep it because it's pretty. I kept it because it's still here. It represents the moment I chose to stand, not sink. The moment I realize waiting for an apology from someone who doesn't believe they're wrong is emotional suicide, and that forgiveness sometimes starts with letting go of the need for one. I don't know if Marcus and Helen ever truly felt regret. I no longer need to know. Their silence after the police hearing felt like a quiet end to a song no one wanted to listen to anymore. I didn't send a message. I didn't retaliate. I didn't try to reconnect. Not because I hated them, but because I'd made peace. Not everyone who brings you into the world is meant to walk it with you. And family, the thing I once sacrificed my youth to protect, turns out, isn't built by blood. It's built on respect, listening, and love that comes with one clear condition. Don't cause harm. I still live in that little apartment, even though my new job could afford something bigger. But I'm not in a rush. I want to stay a little longer, in this space where every scuffed corner carries the mark of the journey I rebuilt myself on. I still drink cinnamon tea every morning. I still clean out the pantry every Sunday. I still write a few lines in my journal every night. Not to remember pain, but to remind myself just how far I've come. One early New Year's evening, Nora came by with a bag of blackened peas and a pot of her homemade butternut squash soup. We had dinner, laughed, and leaned back to watch an old movie together. When the movie ended, Nora suddenly asked, "Do you ever regret any of it?" I stayed quiet for a few seconds, looking out the window where the snow was still falling steadily. Then I turned to her and answered softly, "No, because without those years, I wouldn't have realized how much more I deserved." She nodded. No more words were needed. But this silence felt different. It wasn't heavy. It was a gentle period, closing the final sentence of a long chapter, and the quiet opening to everything ahead. I'm not the daughter who abandoned her family. I'm just the last person in that house who finally chose to save herself. Sophia's story isn't just about leaving a home filled with control and manipulation. It's proof that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. Blood doesn't define family. Kindness, respect, and the ability to love without conditions do. In a world where tradition often masks deep wounds, Sophia had the courage to cut ties, stand tall, and rebuild from the wreckage. And in doing so, she found the most precious thing of all: true peace. What are your thoughts on Sophia's journey? Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to follow this channel for more heartfelt, powerful stories about family and life.